Hey, welcome to another episode. I hope you got all your Christmas shopping done because I still haven't. But I do know that I'm going to make some awesome creamy oyster stew this Christmas Eve. I know that there are some simple recipes out there, mostly just milk and oyster, and that's fine. But today's oyster stew recipe is filled with good stuff like bacon and potatoes, and definitely elevated with some dry white wine. This will win some brownie points with my family, so why don't we get started? So first we're going to cook some bacon. We're going to need 3 strips of bacon. So I used to work at a restaurant making soups all day long, and a lot of the soups that I made used bacon as the foundational flavor. And I can honestly say, bacon really provides some awesome flavor to each and every soup that I made, except for vegetarian stuff, of course. Now add a 1/4 stick of butter to the bacon. It seems like a lot of grease, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not. Now we need to dice up a shallot. You can use a half an onion instead, but shallots do provide a nice, subtle, and more sophisticated flavor to the dish. So if you're going to the store anyway, just grab a shallot. There's really no one way to skin a cat, but I like to just cut through the long end first and then turn it over and just dice them thinly. Now put them away into a little bowl. We're also going to dice up a stick of celery. Celery is amazing, and I use this all the time to soups. Chicken noodle soups, clam chowder, you name it. Also need 4 cloves of garlic. Just crush them and then dice them up finely. There's something about, cream and garlic flavors going together, and this soup is not an exception. We also need a regular Russell potato. The recipe calls for about 1/3 of it. I'm going to chop up, half the potato, and make sure you dice them into about 1/4 inch cubes. We want them small so they cook more thoroughly in the beginning, because we're not cooking the milk later in high heat, because you know what happens when you do. Now add the shallot to our bacon and butter. Then add the chopped garlic. And mix it all around, and we're getting an amazing aroma from all these flavors. Now add our potatoes, and then celery. Now mix everything thoroughly, and we're going to make sure that everything gets cooked thoroughly, especially the potatoes, before we pour in any milk or half and half later. Add a half a teaspoon of salt. Now add a half a teaspoon of white pepper. White pepper, in my opinion, has some really sophisticated flavors and doesn't make your food look like it's full of speckles. Now add a half cup of dry white wine. This white wine is going to elevate this soup to the next level. And we're going to cook off the alcohol a little bit, and in the meantime we'll make sure that everything, including those potatoes especially, will be cooked. Add a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Now this soup is not going to be spicy as it's only a tiny amount, but it really does bring out the flavor. And we'll need about a tablespoon of fresh thyme leaves. I'm basically pulling all the thyme leaves off of the twigs. You can use the dry ones too, but the fresh ones are much better. And thyme leaves, that's one ingredient that I use in my soups all the time. I mean, it really elevates the soup. I use them in chowders and chicken soups and even vegetable soups. It's amazing. Now we're adding 3 cups of whole milk. I'm also adding a cup of half and half. We need enough heavier cream so that when we heat the soup up, it's not going to curdle. And we're only cooking it in medium-low, and so it's that sensitive. Now mix this around, and we're going to heat this up, and make sure you watch it. Never bring this to a boil. We basically want the soup hot enough to cook the oysters all the way through, but not hot enough that it doesn't boil up. And if it starts to bubble up, turn down the heat. As you heat up the soup, you want the milk to look like this, basically without any chunks or curds. But if you do mess up your soup curdles, not the end of the world. Still very much edible, they're just not gonna find it pretty, that's all. Now add a whole jar of fresh oysters, including all the juice, into the soup. And this is the final step of the cooking, just letting the oysters cook all the way through. And once again, watch the soup, make sure you don't let it come to a boil. Now I'm adding some fresh parsley as a final garnish, but I'm also gonna cook this thing for at least 30 seconds because when it's so raw, they're gonna have harsh flavor, so you wanna cook that off for at least 30 seconds. Now add some chopped up green onion for some extra flavors. Now let's thicken up that oyster stew by adding some cornstarch. We need 2 teaspoons of cornstarch and 2 tablespoons of water. And mix that around. Never add cornstarch directly into the soup without doing this first. Add the cornstarch mixture into the soup and continue to heat this up for about a minute and we're finished. Turn off the heat and you're ready to serve this beautiful oyster stew to your family. And if you have a big family, add more oysters because everyone's going to be fighting over them. Those jars got only 5-6 oysters at most. I mean, no one should be eating oyster stew without oysters, right? Add a touch of Parmesan cheese and also a touch of chopped green onion, and this is as good as it gets. This is the best oyster stew, I promise. I hope you guys have amazing holidays, and if you like this recipe today, please hit that like button below, and if you're new, please subscribe for more delicious recipes. Thanks for watching.